Okay, so let us now do a few practice problems related to the material that we have covered this week. So our first practice problem is going to discuss this equivalence between the English auction and the second price auction that we had discussed, right? So let's consider the context first, and then we'll review what we mean by English auction and second price auction, right? So you have got a bakery called Chandan's Bakery, and there a large handmade special chocolate cake has been made for a particular occasion. Okay, and this cake is going to be sold by an auction. There are five potential buyers present. Let's give them names. So you've got Amar, Zahir, Hitesh, Juhi, and Madan. Okay, so the cake is worth 1,000 rupees to Amar, 200 rupees to Zahir, and 50 rupees each to Hitesh, Juhi, and Madan, right? So all three of them think it's worth 50 rupees to each other. The bidders do not collude, so they do not actually get together because they are strangers, and they don't also know each other's valuations, right? So this is basically an example of a private information. So Amar knows that Amar's valuation is 1,000. Zahir knows that Zahir's valuation is 200. Hitesh, Juhi, and Madan each know that their valuation is 50, but they don't know what each other's valuation is. Okay, so that's the setup we are thinking of. All right. The first question asks that suppose the seller sells it using an English auction, who would get the cake and approximately how much would the winning buyer need to pay, right? So remember, in English auction, what happens is that you start out with a low price and then basically you keep increasing the price till only one buyer is left willing. And at that point, that buyer pays whatever is the last final price at which you had the second last person dropping out, right? So you can imagine that, for example, you might want to start out with a bid of 10. In this case, all five are willing to bid for it. So you have to go up to above 50 in order for there to have three players dropping out, Hitesh, Juhi, and Madan. But still, Zahir and Amar are both interested, so they will keep on bidding till you reach 200, at which Zahir is indifferent. And the next increment that you do at that point, the bid ends because you have got only Amar who is willing to kind of like still pay, right? So now Amar is going to win, right? So that's the answer to this question. But the answer to the question of how much is Amar going to pay, that's actually going to depend on how much the increments happen, right? So, for example, if the increments happen to in an order of like 10, right? So you had first a bit of 10, then somebody was willing to pay 20, 30, 40, so on. So therefore, at 200, Zahir would still be willing to kind of like bid. But once it goes to 210, then that's where the bid is going to end and Amar has to pay that 210, right? But this depends on the increment being 10. Instead, if you had the increment being 1 unit each, then the winning bid would have been 201, right? That's what the Amar would have had to pay. If you had an increment of 1 paisa, then it would have been 200 rupees 1 paisa, right? So then depending on how much increment you have, so the answer is going to be that Amar has to pay a bit more than 200. Exactly how much depends on the increment. If you take it to the limiting case, this is almost very close to 200, right? So if you take like, for example, 0.01 paisa, this will be 200.01 will be the final answer, right? And so on. So it's roughly 200 from what we actually discussed. Okay. Now, consider instead a second way of selling it, which is the second bid, sealed bid second price auction. So remember that here, what is the case with the sealed bid second price auction? It's as if everybody on their own is going to write down in a piece of paper without showing others what they are willing to bid for this cake. Okay. And then the cake is going to the person who has written the highest bid. And how much does this person have to pay? This person has to pay an amount equal to the second highest bid that was written down, right? That is the sealed bid second price option. Again, a priori it might seem a bit weird, but because of the reasons that we discussed in class, we have this result that in this case, basically everybody will end up actually bidding their own value, right? So we saw that this is a dominant strategy equilibrium, and in that is the answer here. By the way, we can continue to assume here that no bidder knows each other's value for the cake. Okay. Now, so how much should Amar bid? So Amar should bid his own valuation, which remember is 1,000. How much should Zahir bid? Zahir should bid 200. And how much should each of the bidders bid? So they should all bid 50, right? So then again, Amar is going to end up getting the item, right? And Amar has to pay a pay of 200, right? So you can see that in this, that's why we kind of like stated during the initial lectures that actually this second price seal bid auction is actually very similar to the English auction in the sense that you both end up with the same outcome and the payment is also very roughly same. In fact, in the limit, they are exactly the same, right? So that I hope clarifies a bit about what did we mean when we said that these two auction formats are actually kind of like very similar to each other.